Hey, what's up everybody? My name's Alckemy. Welcome to the channel. Today you and I are going to be having a discussion about workflow and my thoughts on it and just kind of some general advice and some perspective on thinking of things in a certain way. I think that it's really important to understand what workflow is, and I think that as just a definition of how I would define it is how do you get from point A to point B in context of a song, unless if you're just doing a different kind of artistic project or whatever it is that you're working on. So I've watched a few videos as of recent. A lot of them are like, you got to pick a DAW, you got to, you know, some other comments of like organize your sample library and this and that. And some things I agree with, some things I don't agree with. But let's just kind of very quickly talk about what it means to actually go into a song. So if you think about it, right, a song usually has instruments, it has patterns, it has sections, anyways, depending on what kind of music you're making. It has an intro, it has a way to get into the song, it usually has a main theme, and then it has a way to get out of the song. And there might be different chapters of the music in between, but it's still supposed to be relative towards the same thing. Or it could be none of those things, like do what you want, as EasyBot says. The thing is that most electronic music is usually centered around a core idea, and that is the initial concept, right? So that's like when you're writing your hook or when you're writing your main section, if you write bass music, of trying to be like, okay, this is going to be the main core of what I'm going to try to express through this piece of time. And then usually the next most common thing that happens is people are like, yo, I don't know how to get out of this. I'm stuck. I've got this 8-bar loop and I don't know what to do with it. You've heard me say this a billion times, but the duplicate and variate thing is probably the most powerful tool that you have, because it doesn't require you to think about a decision or for you to do any guesswork. It requires you to make this choice to copy what you have and make a change to it, whether it be taking out the hi-hats or pitching your synth up, or going for a more consistent bass line rather than crazy noise sounds or whatever, or changing the chord progression, like changing the drums. There's a billion different things, remixing the main idea. And how you do that is really where the nuance comes into play. That's where the creativity and the individuality comes out. But the same concept of, I have this idea that's 8 bars, well, you need to make it longer usually, or you need to create a different idea. So you either continue the idea and put a spin on it, or you make something brand new. When it comes into writing intros and stuff, a lot of times what I do is I'll just take the main idea of what the song is, or the essence of it, or even just take a sound from the main section. Like it could be a snare, and I will add a bunch of reverb to the snare and then reverse it and slowly kind of like tease the melody or tease the most interesting sound that's within the main section, and then do your build up, or you could do your prod snare build or something, and that's all it has to be. The cool thing when it comes into intros and outros and bridges actually is that they can all actually be the exact same thing, because they're meant to serve as a transition. So if you think about it, the only two things that you actually need to be good at writing is an intro and a main section, because everything after that, in most genres, unless if you're doing something symphonic or something, but just as a means of like, hey, use this in order to help get over your blockage or whatever, is to write an intro and then write a main section. And then all you have to do is like deconstruct the intro if you want to use it as a bridge or an outro. And if you're going into another idea, take that main section, duplicate it, and there you go. Now you can either play the exact same section, or you can make changes to it like I had described from before with all of your different options. Some things that I wanted to talk about with workflow, though, aside from that, is that no matter what DAW you choose, no matter what genre you're making, you need sounds, you need an arrangement, and I guess that's pretty much it. The details and where I think a lot of people get stuck on is like, how do you get to the sounds, or how do you come up with the melodies, or how do you come up with the rhythms, or the idea of the main section or whatever. How do you write a main idea? And those are things that I think that we could cover in a different video. But the thing is like, if you were to open up any single DAW, whatever, every single DAW has some kind of sample thing, and if it doesn't, then it probably has a preset or whatever. But if you type in loop, you go and you type in something like this, then you type in a drum loop. This is hypothetical, by the way, so just take it for what it is. But then you take something else, you know, I guess we're doing something tribal, but you see what I'm getting at though? So with this, you know, this is basically the general idea about how music is made. And the thing is that when you're talking about using samples and loops and stuff, it solves a specific problem. It gives you a starting point of a musicality perspective or a musicality aspect. The other thing is that it's like, yo, I can, and this is just from baseline, right? Like a very fundamental perspective of this, but like this process that I just showed you of putting loops together can be done in any single DAW. It can be done on an Octatrack. You can do this pretty much on a Syntact. You can do this on, I'm looking around for like every other thing that I have. You know what I'm saying? Like if it's recorded audio and you can repeat it, then all you need to do is like put it in freaking FL Studio or put it in Final Cut if you want to. You can make music in Final Cut if you just stack some loops together and play them all together. And that's the same thing when it comes into like, or the interesting perspective when it comes into time-based media. And by time-based media, I mean things that have a duration, right? So movies, in some cases video games, music, these things are time-based media that have these beginning, middle, and ends, right? A picture could stay there forever, and it might be something that tells a story, but it's always there. You know, it's something that is a little bit more timeless. But when you are, you know, doing a storytelling or something, hell, even a book, right? There's an aspect of time that you kind of waddle through and try to figure out. But the thing is like you could literally like make yourself makeshift like a drawn out Ableton thing that I've seen memes do or whatever, and like pretend to put your placement there, and there you go. This is it doesn't make any sounds, but you are replicating an imaginative way to express an arrangement. And what that means to you is totally different. And I know that this is a little bit ambiguous and abstract advice, but what I'm trying to do is go back and center on like, dude, music making is only as complicated as you make it now these days, especially with the technology, you know. And back then it was only as complicated as you made it because we had much more simple definitions of what music was. You know what I'm saying? Somebody could be like, yo, I made a song, and they don't have any instruments and they just do this drum pattern or whatever, and they're like, I wrote that. Like somebody had to originally have done that, right? And that's usually as complex as it was. But you scale that factor into today, you scale that idea of tune writing and whatnot, and it's like I said before, any DAW that you have, Logic Pro for iPad, you know, Koala Sampler, you can do this, and all you have to do is this in a means that makes sense of having a beginning, a middle, and an end. When it comes into probably, I don't want to say it's one of the biggest mistakes that I've made, but it's definitely one of the things that like put me in a position of sucking at music for a really long time, was that I was so hellbent on doing everything from scratch. And for the most part, I still do. And I think that it's just my curse, and I think that it's also benefited me from, you know, starting a sound design channel for YouTube or music channel or whatever. But like, yo, it's a lot, and I think that taking that kind of plunge, you got to be a special kind of person, meaning that you're really incredibly masochistic or something. But do you know how many trap producers are out there that are doing wonderful right now in the industry, and all they do is just, you know, get some cool drum sounds, get some cool loops from people that they sampled, or, you know, libraries that they downloaded, probably libraries that they downloaded illegally, you know. And I'm not here to judge, but you know what I'm saying? It's like they just got it for free, and then they're like, okay, let's toss it in and then come up with a cool arrangement. Technical hurdles jump in your way a lot of your creativity. And so what I recommend within your workflow is get comfortable with writing compositions using any means necessary that has the path of least resistance. You'll hear that a lot in martial arts. But this is a cultivator. This isn't something about where you're going to end up. This is a cultivator on getting the music writing process down, you know, getting comfortable with being like, I need to write something. I need to put something out. It's a project for school or something. You got to write an essay. Well, the first few essays that you write suck, but they always have this, like, you know, this structure of, here is my introduction, I've got my thesis, and then I've got my 3 reasons why, I've got my counterpoint, and I address that counterpoint, and then I have my conclusion, right? Like, we all know this shit. It's embedded within our brains. And really what we want to do is just to try to filter all of that knowledge and that systemizing of learning, and then we create it in a way that is unique to us. It's a framework, but within that framework, what you end up doing is you start being like, okay, so I need to get my loops. I need to get to these things that are going to be these compartments of ideas. But how do I do that? That's where shit gets weird. That's where it gets complicated. All right, well, are you sound designing your own stuff? Okay, well, maybe you've got this dope melody, but you can't find the right sound. Okay, well, man, I wish I could sound as good as these other people. Why can't I figure out how to get my aesthetic of the drums? Why can't I figure out how to get these cool basses? Why can't I figure out, how to, I can't sing, or I can't play guitar, or, you know what I'm saying? There's a lot of this stuff that gets in the way that takes you on this journey. Sometimes it's worth it, sometimes it's not, of shit, I'm not making music anymore because I'm trying to learn something. If you're not doing that consciously, I think that it can be extremely hurtful if you're aware of it. For example, I took the plunge into hardware recently, and it would cost me a lot of money and it was expensive, but you know what? I wanted to learn the process because I wanted to figure out how to make beats on things not having all the tools that I have, and I also wanted to understand what the perspective of having limitations were, right? Because for me, I came from a place of, well, where did I start? I started with Machine, and then I graduated to Ableton, and then I eventually ended up with Bitwig, but I've tried other things, but none of them stuck as well with me as all this other stuff, as Bitwig, and then what I'm doing now in order to craft my beats. The thing that I've come to realize, though, and maybe I got lucky, and maybe this is just like how I found my happy place a lot, especially with what I'm doing right now, is I've got a very specific way about how I make my drums. I've got a very specific way about how I make my bass. And whenever I pull the limitations onto myself, I take what fragments of that process I can and apply it to other stuff, right? So the Octatrack, right? It can only sample, and let's say I wanted to make a neuro bass within there, and there's a lot of effects that you can actually stack if you're creative with it, but at the same time, I have to be crafty and I have to be more creative in my problem solving, because I can't just stack a bunch of EQ filters with distortion. I can do a couple, I can use a few different kinds of distortion, but you get what I'm saying? And then I have to resample that. It's the same kind of problems that people were doing back in the day with like doing the triple split of tracks, and you got your low, your mid, your high, but they were all audio tracks, and then there would be effects on different ones, and then you'd have to like bounce it all out as a single thing. You know what I'm saying? So you don't really have to like do that anymore per se, but it causes you to start thinking about things differently. The Syntact is another great example because it doesn't have any sampling. It has a very limited synthesizer engine that can create a wider range of sounds, but this makes me focus, you can't see it, but this makes me focus more on the compositional aspects and the beat writing. So, but it's still a piece of my workflow. It's still a piece of things that I've adopted. I just made this video, yesterday, on how to route audio into the Octatrack, and instead of me trying to be like, I'm over here on the Octatrack, I'm over here on the Syntact, everything goes into this process that I'm talking about. It goes again in how do you make your loops, how do you, do this. Well, I might do it from Faceplant, where I make my drums from scratch. I might make a stupid beat on this. I might, chop a beat or something, or I might send a drum loop from here into the Octatrack and then back through into this. It doesn't matter, but it all goes into the same process eventually. Does that make sense? In the end, it becomes all the same stuff. It's just about how you get to the sounds. It's just about how you get to how you approach your melodies, how you approach your chord progressions, if that's what you're into, Maybe your inflection about how you write lyrics is a particular process of, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to, turn on some calming music with Rainstorm in the back, and I'm going to close my eyes and do this, Corey was telling me that I think Doja Cat or something was doing like, maybe it was somebody else, but one of a very famous pop artist right now was like doing flashcards and was like, okay, we're going to write these different song ideas down for flashcards. Boom, we picked one. All right, let's go write the song. You know what I mean? If you're really stuck on making tunes and stuff, it's because your workflow isn't satisfying to you. It's because either A, it doesn't produce the results that you want, or B, you haven't put enough time in it, or maybe it just is not fun to do. And the beautiful thing about today is that there's so many different approaches to making music. I tend to try to find a lot of different ones to see where those similarities are at, and I try to utilize this knowledge that I've accumulated over time in order to share that with you. One of the biggest revelations that kind of helped me come on to this idea was I was taking a lesson from somebody who's a very prolific artist, and he was talking to me about releasing the idea of doing sound design for things that are specific, you know? So as opposed to being like, well, how do I make this snare? How do I make this kick? They're good fundamentals to know, but if you kind of have this modular approach to how you're designing stuff and just allow yourself to create things, maybe with one particular limiting factor, like it's going to be the same melody and you're going to twist up the melody and have as many different timbres as possible, or you're going to make a bunch of different melodies, but they're all going to be the same instrument. Just a couple of examples. But taking that and making these, you know, sound design jams and mud pies and stuff made it a lot easier for me to figure out how to actually come up with different ideas and different loops, you know. A mud pie, I guess, in a lot of ways, if you don't know what a mud pie is, it's basically just recording out a jam of you twisting knobs, trying to create as many variations to whatever degree as you want to, and then having one long audio file to where you'll go back and pick different parts of it. But what I want you to think about that is that a lot of times it's micro loops, you know, or there's like pieces of a loop that are fragmented throughout gold and then trash right next to it, and gold and trash, or maybe it can become treasure from this trash that you have, depending on how you process things. I don't know if this is making sense or not. It seems like a pretty, you know, general statement about understanding how workflow stuff works in the first place. And I'm not really trying to confuse anybody, but what I want to come back to is the fundamentals of you need to create a song structure of that beginning, middle, and end. You can be like, you know, intro, bridge, main section, break, build, main section 2. I don't know. What I do is I just go intro, main section 1, main section 2, and then outro, because I just like to like do beats and stuff these days. But you know what I mean? Having a structure in which having a place to start with, and then you got to fill it up with sounds that include either rhythm, melody, chords, harmony, or all of them together. You know, if you need vocals, you need to find a way to get to your vocals. If you need, you know, a specific kind of thing, don't get so hung up on like specific sounds, especially if you're listening to an artist and you're like, yo, I need to know how to make that bass. Like, no, dude, you don't. Trust me. I've gone down that road. You can take inspiration from it, but you need to figure out how to express the same impact through composition, express the same feeling that they're giving you over, I need that sound so I can use it in my own track. That's probably one of the biggest pieces of advice that I have for you. So yeah, once you have that understanding, then you just get to this process, right? Everything is in a loop. It's all nice and tidy. Maybe you've got a collection of loops or something, and then you just, you know, you throw your drums down. You're like, all right, these drums are cool. This, obviously, whatever I played for you is total garbage, but, you know, just hypothetically, you know, I got my drums. Okay, well, I've got my melody, and then now I'm like, I got this idea. Now what do I do with it? Because I'm stuck. You duplicate it. And then you're like, all right, well, maybe this time I'm going to pitch this up an octave. You make a change to it. And then you're like, all right, well, I need to figure out a way to get into this. So maybe you're like, okay, I'm going to take this, copy it, and then I'm going to pitch it down by 2 octaves, or I'm going to pitch it down an octave from the original. Well, look, I've got this reverse thing. We get into the beat here. There's a little bit of a change up, you know, maybe we can kind of cut some drums up or something, or do a little cute little fill. And then by the end of this, we duplicate this again and maybe have a different pitch or something to where it just kind of fades out. Beginning, main idea, outro. And this is a very oversimplification about how track structures work, but the fundamental aspect of it is still true. You know, it is what it is. If you're cutting up a video on a timeline, chances are like you've got this whole video and then you're just taking out parts of the video that are like For example, me saying or me saying, or having bloopers or something. Like, music production is the same thing. It can be the same thing. You can cut up a whole song and remix it without having to have anything more than a single track. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I guess I'm trying to give you this perspective to bring you some confidence in that, like, you likely have the tools and the knowledge and the wherewithal to make tracks, to finish songs, to not get yourself stuck. The key to it is to be proactive in your problem solving and to understand what your problems are through your different production stages. So if you start with an intro and you don't know what comes after an intro because you haven't studied arrangement, then it's like, well, now what do I do, right? Or maybe you haven't worked on intros or outros or bridges or whatever, and the only thing that you ever do is just throw two loops together. So you need to start exploring possibilities about how to get out of that. And what you're going to do over time is discover your favorite processes, or you're going to learn from other people. You're going to take lessons from other people about things that you like in your production, and you're going to internalize that, and in turn, a lot of that stuff is going to become your own. I think a great example of that is the lessons that I've done from Cage, right? Cage has taught me how to make drums, and 2 years ago, even 1 year ago, my drums didn't sound anything like they do now. And it was because I put the time in, but it was also because I really tried to take the time to look at what he was doing, look at what he does, look at where he's going. That's a lot of like conversations that I try to talk with him about, and then be like, all right, how do I do this the Alckemy way, the Ian way, or whatever you want to call me, right? How do I do this in a way that is going to make sense to me, that is not just going to try to be a straight up copy? Copying is good up to a certain point, but making it your own is part of the fun. But now that I understand this process of getting to the drums, well, that led to my aesthetic, right? That led to the biggest thing that I wanted within my music, was I wanted my drums to just be obnoxiously loud. Okay, cool. Well, now I need to do that with all the other elements, right? I need to be like, well, how do I do that with melody? How do I do that with bass, right? How do I learn to make myself a cool bass line? Well, what are the components of that? Is it the sound design? Is it that I'm not really good at, understanding how bass lines work? Is it because I am just trying to throw random sounds together without any intention? But all that goes out the window if you have a loop that's already like done for you and you're like, this sounds good. You know what I'm saying? So I guess I just kind of want to leave you with, like, don't get so caught up trying to force your process on things or trying to force things to work. If you have an idea that's worth sticking through, go fish for a loop, go fish for a preset if you absolutely have to. I personally don't like doing that. I like to do things a little bit differently, but that's part of my workflow process. That's part of what I like to do, what I like to, what I enjoy. And the flip side of that is whenever I'm working on the aux track, which I've only had for 2 days now, but I've already made tracks on it, 2 actually specifically. You know what I did? I pulled up Zane's sample packs. I pulled up Cage's sample packs. I didn't make the drums. I didn't make the melody. I just chopped it and did some re-sampling to it, did some processing, and then came out with an arrangement because my musical direction was still there. And developing a musical direction will take you through any kind of technical hurdle that you have, because if you have this intention behind what it is that you're trying to accomplish, other than copying or other than being like, it needs to sound like someone specific, then you're going to allow yourself to continue making creative decisions with the limitations that you have. You're like, oh, okay, well, maybe I can't add another filter. Okay, well, maybe I can, try to automate this other filter, or maybe I can try to, turn it down or replace the sound, or, you know what I mean? Like, you start going through these banks of options that you have that maybe you don't normally take. And that's kind of how one thing leads to another, but you have to be open to it. You have to be willing to, accept that. If your bass sounds like complete doo-doo, sometimes the best thing to do is to just low pass it and be like, yo, does the sub sound good? Okay, cool. You got an 808. Don't force yourself to work through these problems. Figure out how to get the track done. Figure out how to get through it, And sometimes changing the approach is the most important thing. You want to write dubstep, but rhythm basses are really hard. I get that. For one, download some, packs or whatever, or watch some tutorials on it and make the shitty version that doesn't sound anything like what producer you admire, but you made a shitty version of your rhythm bass. You can still write a rhythm tempo, boom, and it doesn't have to sound nearly as good. But if you never allow yourself to get to that creation process of actually writing the music, then all of that cultivation doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, you can always replace the sounds. If the arrangement is there, the placement, the timing, the musical intention, you know what I'm saying? Like, if you want to beatbox into a thing because you want to figure out how to make halftime music, that's something I wish I would have done a long time ago. Just, well, okay, cool. I practiced that, and now I've got a template, or now I've got a stencil in which to be like, at some point, I'm going to replace this with heavy drums, and it's going to become something that I want it to, like, that's going to be more satisfying aesthetically, because an aesthetic is not the core of it. It is an aesthetic. It is a cosmetic, it's the shiny paint job. But composition is king. So I would even say, when you're listening to music and stuff, like, really maybe even try to hear music differently. And what I mean by that is stop listening for all the cool sounds. Stop listening for that specific thing and just focus on what is happening with the composition. Oh, somebody did this really cool offbeat thing, right? They skipped half of a beat and then the whole entire thing jumped over and kind of caught up. Oh, okay, well, now I can use that. I do that all the time, actually. It's something that I stole from Cage directly. That's my favorite example. But maybe there's this cool little fill where somebody goes boom, 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 boom. Well, like, you can put that, like, you can steal that aspect of the composition within your tune. Maybe the only thing that you can detect, because you're kind of new to this, is picking up a drum pattern in drum and bass, right? It's just boom, poof, boom, 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 poof, boom, poof. Maybe you can't copy the bass that you hear, but maybe you can copy the phrasing and the rhythm. This is just how my brain works, and this is how I decompartmentalize stuff. And I think that it's important to kind of focus on these things, because if you allow yourself to be fluid and flexible, and you start carving out the intention behind what you want to create within your music, then it's a lot easier to let the small shit go. And that's probably, again, just some gold advice that I have for you, is like, you got to learn how to just let shit go, and you got to figure out what it is that you're trying to accomplish within your sessions. Sometimes it is just meandering. There needs to be time for that. Sometimes it's, okay, I need to write something. Well, shit, write something stupid. Nobody said that you needed to write something for, I don't know, Hans Zimmer newest film, or you need to write something because what's his face is playing out tracks live and you want to have something to submit. Those are great goals to have, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, you gotta write crappy tunes. Doing the 30-day beat challenge, that's where a lot of this is coming from, for sure. Getting an Octatrack, getting things that have limitations. Hell, I figured out how to make my kind of drums in Logic Pro for iPad, and there's a ton of limitations in there that I've been complaining about, and I was like, oh wait, you know what I'm saying? Like, you can figure it out. It might take you a lot more processes. It might take you a lot more, sorry if I'm talking in circles, but it's possible. And if you know how to do it in one way, then sometimes some of the fun is being like, how do I take this process and apply it to this application? Or how do I take this process of design and express it through a different set of limitations? How much of this formula do I have to change in which to get a similar, if not the same result? So I don't know. Hopefully that perspective is somewhat helpful to you. I needed to talk with somebody, and I think that sometimes trying to talk with somebody in a healthy way is the best thing that I can do right now. If some of you know, I posted a thing on YouTube where I lost somebody, and I'm not saying this to be sad or to do a pity party or anything like that, but part of how I cope is staying busy, and I did want to talk about how to overcome some of the greatest challenges that I've run into through my musical career. So with that, I just want to wish you all, for one, a happy new year. I want to wish you all good health. If you got any, take care of your loved ones. I'll say that much. Take care of your loved ones. Make sure that they hear from you once in a while, and try to repair any relationships that you have that is fixable, if it's, within boundaries and stuff. I was really lucky that I was really close to my grandmother. I'm really sad that I wasn't able to be there for her during her final moments, but she knows I love her. And that's what's important. And yeah, I don't know. Take care of each other and be good to each other. And I want that to be the same for all of you as well. So anyways, hit me up if you have any questions. Hopefully that was insightful. Sorry for the downer at the end of the video and the morbid stuff. If you want to support the channel, alchemy.com. I will be back live Saturday, January 6th. Today's the 5th. I just needed to take a day off and just, I don't know, just do me. So have a good one, everybody. I'll see you in the next video.